Let's start with Russia, given the fact that I don't believe you guys have said anything yet. This building has not said anything yet about the election over the weekend. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think I would first draw attention to the fact that it's simply no surprise that Vladimir Putin was reelected and that he remains the leader of Russia. We have talked for a long time here about the clampdown on many of the freedoms that people should enjoy in Russia and have not been able to enjoy. We're watching closely the monitors who are involved in the election, the gold standard of monitors, the OSCE monitors. They have issued a preliminary report on the election. We have no reason to doubt that the report's conclusions are incorrect. We have every reason to believe that the conclusions are correct. I'd like to read for you just an excerpt from their preliminary report. The OSCE ODIHR team noted that the election in Russia took place in an overly controlled legal and political environment marked by continued pressure on critical voices. Restrictions on fundamental freedoms resulted in a lack of genuine competition and an uneven playing field. We saw in the news over the weekend that some people were paid to turn out to vote. We've seen that opposition leaders have been intimidated, jailed, and other things of the sort. So I would just draw us back to the OSCE preliminary report. We will review that report. We'll take a look at their final report when it comes out.
Okay. So just as a little aside, ODIHR, we like to call it ODIR.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Tell you, Matt should be doing this job. What are you doing sitting down there, Matt?
This is very, this is a bit of a contrast here between what you just said and what was not said at the White House a little while ago, and what was not said in the president's phone call with President Putin, at least according to what the White House said. Does this mean your acceptance of your endorsement of the ODIR assessment? Does that mean that you do not believe that that this election was a free and fair one?
I think that we would agree with the OSCE and its preliminary report. Again, it's preliminary. We've seen all the news that has come out of Russia. I would direct you back to the readout that the White House provided of the president's phone call with Vladimir Putin. Just because you see certain words in a readout does not mean that the call wasn't more comprehensive than the readout that was provided. We've seen that on many occasions at the State Department, where a readout just provides somewhat of a limited scope or description of a phone call.
Right, but I mean, one thing that the president said himself, but also was in the statement, was that he had congratulated President Putin on his victory. Is that something the State Department shares?
You know what? I would say that that's called protocol. And there are many countries from around the world that when someone wins, if you will, an election, that you pick up the phone and you place that phone call. We saw that from Macron. We've seen that from other world leaders who have done the same thing with Vladimir Putin. People call the United States when we when we participate in an election and win an election. So I just say that's standard. Look, there's one thing that we have to do, whether folks like it or not. We have a relationship with the Russian government. That is just a part of the world. That is just simply a reality. That does not mean that we agree with them on everything. That does not mean that we get along on every single issue. We have been very clear about calling them out for their responsibility of the horrific attacks that have continued to take place in eastern Ghouta in Syria, and we hold Russia accountable for that. So I want to be clear that we call out Russia when they are responsible for an action, and we will not hesitate to do so. But the reality is that we are two nuclear powers, two superpowers in this world, and we still have to be able to pick up the phone and have a dialogue and conversation with one another.
That's okay, that's understood. But, you know, the OSCE didn't come out with a damning report about the French presidential election. I don't remember the president calling up President Maduro of Venezuela after he won in what you guys said was a sham election last year. I can't remember any president calling up President Mugabe and saying, congrats on your Zimbabwe election over the course of decades until he was finally ousted. So
well, Matt, I can give you the phone numbers to reach Angela Merkel, also Macron, and
if you got their cell,
and the President of the United States. You can call them and ask them why those world leaders and others did this as well. The reality is we have to have a relationship whether folks like it or not.
Did you get Chancellor Merkel's number from the NSA or someone else?
Very funny. I'll see where I can get it.
And just the last thing on this.
Okay.
When she was asked if you guys thought that the election was free and fair, your colleague Sarah Sanders said, we don't get to dictate how other countries operate.
Mm-hmm.
Does this? I mean, no one is saying that the United States dictates how other countries operate, but you do call them out, and you seem to have called them out here. Despite what was not said at the White House. So I'm just wondering, when the human rights reports come out later on this month, potentially, or next month, is there going to be criticism or a recognition of shortcomings in other countries' elections, regardless of Russia?
Well, that human rights report has not been released just yet. We look forward to releasing it in the coming weeks. We don't have a date for it just yet. It has not been finalized at this point, so I'm not going to preview what's in it. And by the way, it's big, thick, and I haven't taken a look at all the details yet.
You're not removing the United States from criticizing other elections that don't meet international standards, are you?
The State Department, and the State Department does this. We will certainly call out other countries where other countries are responsible for bad actions. That hasn't changed. That doesn't change administration to administration. Leslie, go ahead.